Are comic book stores actually responsible for Diamond going bankrupt? We're going to find out in this video. Welcome to Wonder World Comics. I'm Dennis Barger, 45-year veteran of buying everything collectible, 35-year veteran of selling everything collectible, and 20-year veteran of owning a comic book store. So as everybody knows, Diamond Comics is running through bankruptcy right now. Diamond is the glue that really held the industry together for over 30 years. And I'm telling you this, right now, some people are looking at comic retailers as maybe the reason why Diamond is going bankrupt. Let me take you back to 2017, when comic retailer Jamie Colgrove from Pack Rat Comics posted this iconic picture of 3 months worth of unsold comic books, equaling $1,400. This is $1,400 that customers said, please order this for me and I'll buy them from you. And then they never showed up to pick up those books. This was indicative by every retailer as to roughly what they were going through in their stores. That's 2,000 stores that were all eating close to $500 or more a month in unpaid comic pulls. Well, let's extrapolate that 8 years later. Diamond filed bankruptcy for $39 million that they owed publishers, printers, you name it. They owed a lot of people a lot of money, and they didn't have the money to pay it back. Just this week, the courts have announced retailers owe Diamond $33 million. That's $6 million less than what Diamond needs to get out of bankruptcy. Retailers don't have that money because retailers are sitting on giant stacks of unsold books. These are books that customers told them they want and never picked up. This has been going on in this industry forever. At the time of 2017, it was estimated there was about 2,000 comic book stores. By my estimation, and the industry really doesn't share these numbers, there's only about 1,200 real legitimate comic book stores left. Those real legitimate comic book stores owe the majority of this $33 million. Now let me explain a few things just so you understand. Comic book stores place an order with Diamond Comics and the other distributors, roughly 2 months before that comic book comes out. They're given one last chance to reduce or increase those orders in a thing called Final Order Cutoff, or FOC, 3 weeks before the release of those comic books. The $11 million that's owed right now is from just the last 90 days. That's $11 million from 1,200 comic book stores over those 90 days. That picture of Jamie pointing at those $1,400 in comics, that was $1,400 in 90 days. So now you've got all this money owed on one side, all this money owed on the other, in the middle. But in the middle is Diamond Comics, who was helping rob Peter to pay Paul. So we have to go back even further now, to the 1970s, when comic books were only available on your newsstand, in a 7-Eleven, at the grocery store, on those little spinny racks. The way they operated that was the comic industry gave 7-Eleven 100 comic books. And if 7-Eleven sold 80 comic books, they could return the other 20, and they received about 20% profit on the 80 that they sold. That was a pretty good deal for all of those guys. They didn't have to put out any money, they just had to pay for what they collected the money for, and everybody was happy. Except comic book stores wanted to go into business for themselves. They didn't want to be a newsstand, they wanted to buy the comic books and create a hub for people to come for all comic books. And they didn't want to get rid of them after 2 or 3 months. They wanted to keep them for a couple months, a year, forever. So that created the direct market. And the deal that was struck was comic book stores could buy comic books at 50% off, have them for as long as they wanted because they were paying for these in advance, but they couldn't return them ever. That's where we get to Diamond. Diamond became a monopoly of all the distributors at one point, 30 some years ago, and they were the only distributor. And the reason Diamond could make money was all of these retailers were buying the comic books at 50% of cover price, and Diamond would make 10% of that 50%, sometimes 15% if they had the right deal. So Diamond was a monopoly that made a percentage on every comic book sold in the United States. But the only way they got paid was if the retailers paid them. They didn't get that money from the publishers. They had to pay the publisher for every comic book sold. So several years ago, right around the time Jamie posted that picture, I was ready to buy my first building. And I went to the bank with my nice little sack of money ready for a down payment and a mortgage. And the bank said, "Your business doesn't have any business credit." I'm like, "What are you talking about? I buy $150,000 to $200,000 worth of comics from Diamond Comics every year for the last 15 years. How do you mean I have no credit?" "Well, Diamond isn't reporting any of that." So I went to Diamond Comics and I said, "Diamond, is it possible for you to start reporting that I'm paying you every week for all my comic books?" And Diamond was like, "Yeah, Dennis, we'll get around, we'll talk to you about that later." Well, a year goes by and they haven't talked to me about it. So I stand up at another one of the retailer summits and I said, "Hey, Diamond, remember last year when I said, can we talk about you guys positively recording my credit so that I can start, buying buildings and building my business?" And they're like, "Yeah, Dennis, let's talk about this after the meeting." And a very big person at Diamond walked up to me and said, "Dennis, let me buy you a drink at the bar." And so we got to the bar and I ordered my drink and they're like, "Dennis, we can't report to the credit agencies because right now," and this is around 2016, 2017, "right now, 80% of the accounts at Diamond are in arrears." That means those accounts, 80% had not kept their bills up to date. I was in the 20% of accounts that were keeping my bills up to date, but I was being held back by the 80% of retailers that weren't paying their bills. The 80% that racked up this $33 million bill with Diamond. They had all those years to collect all that money, and the retail community could not pay it. Now, is that the retailer's fault for racking up a bill that they knew they couldn't ever pay off? Is it Diamond's fault for allowing those retailers to get that far into debt? Is it the publisher's fault for making comic books that the customers didn't want to pick up? But either way, I, as one of the good retailers who wanted to build my credit by paying Diamond every week for the comic books that I wanted to sell, it wasn't helping me or benefiting me, it was to my detriment. So we're looking at a problem created by deadbeat customers that did not come in and pick up their products. Those retailers kept placing orders for those deadbeat customers. They're partially responsible. Then you've got Diamond Comics, who allowed deadbeat stores to keep racking up bad credit with them and kept them from reporting the good stores for the good credit. But don't look past the publishers. The publishers allowed Diamond to pay a little later because they were waiting for the retailers, to extend books to the retailers they knew might not sell as well. 10 years ago, I had the bigwigs at Marvel, DC, and Image all to myself out before we went in for a meeting. And I pitched them on an idea. We've got all of this explosion at the movie theaters. Why don't we put a little kiosk in those movie theaters that all the comic book stores in that area can go and man for free? All you have to do is make some free comic books for us to hand out everybody going into that movie theater with a little stamp or sticker with the comic shop locator service on that. And we will all share in building this market. This problem is a problem of no growth. If we had $1,500 worth of new customers coming in every 3 months, it would absorb those $1,400 worth of deadbeat customers sticking it to the comic retailer. If we had giant growth from 7-Eleven spinny racks and Marvel characters on Slurpee cups like we did in the 70s, we would have growth. But as we lose customer after customer, as the store after store closes, and more people are going in to see Marvel movies, DC movies, watch Walking Dead on TV, and we're not seeing that growth at the comic book store, that was the time that we needed to rethink this business model, not just continually soaking the retailer as they're getting fewer and fewer customers. What can we do to get out of this problem? Well, there's not much we can do for Diamond. Diamond is probably not going to come out of this like they were before. But we still have Penguin Random House. We still have Lunar. There's this buzzing about a third guy coming into the picture, and maybe even a fourth guy coming into this picture. And if those guys come into this picture when Diamond is long gone, here's what they need to do. You've got to get comic books in the hands of everybody going to see those movies. Maybe Disney Plus needs to send a comic book out to all their subscribers. Same thing with Paramount, same thing with Max. If you've got a new release coming on those streaming platforms, figure out a way to get a comic book into their hands. Then go to the next step. Get comic books in more places than just the 1,200 comic book stores. There was a really good program where they put $1.25 comic books in every Dollar Tree. That exploded. Every one of them sold out. But I haven't heard a follow-up plan to that. Whereas we have the Dollar Tree, we need Dollar General, we need 7-Eleven, we need every place that moms take kids to get a comic book in those hands. I think it's gonna take time, but if this industry wants a comic book industry, it needs to start sacrificing right now. Because the comic book stores, they didn't rack up $33 million because they didn't want to pay. They racked up $33 million because they could not pay. And Disney and Warner Brothers, they've got enough money that they could pay for all of this if they want to. Thank you again for watching Wonder World Comics. I'm Dennis Barger. Tune in for another episode coming up very soon. Bye.